Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Building Subtext. Today, I want to give a brief introduction to Infinite Memory, which I think is the coolest thing that I've ever put into subtext. I have it as a blog post, but I thought it would be good to go over it just in action so that you can see what it's like. What I have here is the original short story of Brokeback Mountain from the New York Times, just to have something that's different than the original, or at least the screenplay. And what I did is I just uploaded it into Muse and then just asked it what the 4 through lines are. And then it just went through, broke them down. It identified the main character, identified Jack as the obstacle character, and then their relationship as the relationship story through line. There's a little bit here in the beginning, which is likely more general knowledge of stuff. I asked about the tire iron, and then it was bringing up like generic symbolism and that kind of junk. So then what I just wanted to show you is as I'm going further and further down, what used to happen in Muse is after like the 5th or 6th question, that it would just totally lose track. At least it would start to lose its mind. And I had a way of doing it where it would keep it going as long as it possibly could, which was really nice with the latest context window that was like bigger so that I had more room to do stuff. But it's nothing like what it is now. So that you can see as I'm going down here, I asked it what the relationship problem was, and it did not identify it. Again, it did like a generic sort of thing. It has nothing to do with the story form. In subtext, I don't necessarily call it the relationship story problem. I refer to it as the relationship story condition, because there really isn't a problem in a relationship. There's a condition upon which why those two people are together. So then the relationship story condition is identified as temptation. That's what's bringing them together. Then it's starting to identify all that. Again, instead of focus and direction for the relationship, I use flow and resistance because those work better with relationships. And it could not correctly identify it. Although, let's see if it did it eventually. Oh, I just eventually told it. I said the relationship story resistance is disbelief and the flow is faith. And so then it went ahead and explained how that could turn up in the story and constantly referring to that original document that I upload for examples. So it's not just doing what it's been trained on, but rather a mixture of the story that I uploaded and then the context of the story form, which is an understanding of the conflict that's going on in the narrative. So here you can see how disbelief as the relationship story resistance shows up, and then their skepticism that there's any way that they could ever be together. And then, of course, the way the relationship continues to flow is through faith and through believing in each other. And you can see I'm starting to get further and further away, and yet it still maintains the entire conversation. Here it's picking out specific things from the actual story form that I have uploaded for Brokeback Mountain, where I just have these things put in. I don't have the actual storytelling. So it's taking the understanding of the narrative structure, the definitions, all the kind of stuff that goes into what these words actually mean, and then is able to send back a more intelligent understanding and appreciation of all the inequities that are there in the story, because all of these are related to each other and they're different for every story. Of course, I gave it a little love. I said, that is absolutely incredible. And then I asked, what are the 4 transits of the objective story through line? So in subtext, there are these transits that are how you progress through each through line. There's 4, so you can think of that as almost 4 acts if you had the second act split into 2. And then it went through and identified transit 1, transit 2, 3, and 4. These were all just based on the story, like it just broke it up into 4. And then I asked it if it knew what the actual ones were, and this is just me testing it to see if it could actually read the story form like it's supposed to. That didn't quite work, so I said, I just looked it up for you. And then the progression of the objective story is becoming, being, conceiving, and then conceptualizing. So then what it did is it took its original understanding of those 4 sections of the story and contextualized them in terms of what the thematic focus was for each act. So it started with becoming, and then being, and then switched into their conceiving, where they're trying to reconcile desire and duty. And then at the end, the culmination is a conceptualizing. And that's like the end where they figure out that they just can't put it all together. They can't make it all work. I did the same thing with the main character of the story. And then again, it has some very detailed stuff. But as you see, it hasn't lost context. It hasn't said, oh, I don't know who you're talking about, or I don't know what story this is. It had a really great understanding of his unique abilities, what could have made it all work out, his optimistic anticipation for a better future. But it's not enough to overcome his critical flaw, which is rationalization. In this case, for him, he's always fabricating excuses for his actions that will excuse him from societal judgment. This flaw significantly undermines his journey as it keeps him from fully embracing his true self and his love for Jack. If I was writing Brokeback, or if I had written this story and then this had come up, I could raise that up and actually show it more and more that it's his rationalizations, his excuses that ultimately undoes the relationship and brings him to his sad place. And so I said, oh, that's really sad. He had all the hope, but his excuses were what made it all end in failure. And then I asked if there were any specific examples of that rationalization. And then it went through, picked them out of the story. Again, you can see I'm still going. This conversation is still going, and it will go on forever and ever, always keeping everything in context within the context of the story that I'm currently looking at in the story form. So I found that really amazing and really cool. So I just wanted to share that with everybody and to show how that all plays out in terms of infinite memory. It's still going on, 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 still going on. Here we have the objective story, transit. Oh, that should have been obstacle character. I think I corrected it. And then, let's see, again, same thing. I talk about the emotional connection and vulnerability between the two of them. That was the past. And I was just talking through building on my understanding of the narrative. So I know the story and I know what happens, but then with the story form itself, I can have a better appreciation of the thematic conflict that's going in. So that's a really great use case for Muse, is just upload your favorite story and then start exploring all these different ways of looking at narrative, like all the different ways of understanding why a narrative is so good. It's a fantastic story, beautiful story, different than a lot of what we usually get. And so understanding the argument that's being played out in the background, the narrative that's in there, it's a great educational tool that you can just upload whatever screenplay you want to learn more about. So then I just said, thank you. And that was it. So that's Infinite Memory, the first introduction. And you can read the whole thing. I have it on Narrative First if you want to read the whole document. And then I went today and set it up so that you can have infinite memory, but it's confined to the actual story you're working on. So if you're sitting here and you're developing a narrative, this is what it looks like in Subtxt when you're just working on the story itself. I just have this random story that was called Trail to Sacred Grounds. I believe it was just a Western. I just did a group of cowboys on their way to an Indian burial ground, late 1800s. And I think it was based on No Sudden Move, which is a thriller that was on HBO Max, crime thriller, Soderbergh, Benicio del Toro, and Don Cheadle. I just used the structure. So that's the narrative structure of this, combined it with that story idea, and then used Muse and Subtxt to basically build out the entire narrative just from this basic idea. But this isn't an example of narrative agents, but this is how it all worked out. It came up with this idea of William F. Boyd, who's haunted by his past actions against Native American tribes. Chief Red Cloud is the obstacle character. Their relationship is adversaries to allies. And the cool part is that now, if you just do this part here, like you just come in here and you just do the first part, which is to break down the 4 through lines. So just taking this basic story idea, group of cowboys on their way, and then you just turn that into a complete story, which is the 4 through lines here. Then when you start to develop the rest of the narrative here with Muse, so this is the pop-up version of Muse here. There's the standalone one, which is what I was showing you here. But then when you're within a story and you're looking at all the structure and all the stuff that's in it, if you just pop up Muse here, then it's contained within this narrative. And the cool part that I just added today is it will remember it in between different conversations. For instance, if I'm in this one and I start a new conversation here, it's going to forget this stuff. I don't have it because otherwise you could be talking about a bunch of different stuff and I don't want it to cross-pollinate like that. But if you are working within the confines of a story, then what you can do is you can simply just ask, what is the plot progression of this main character through line? And it knows Captain Boyd, and then it knows the story form here. These are those 4 transits, and it just gave me an idea of what will happen in each act, just based on that one little thing, right? Which is super, super cool. And then if I go look at the other ones, actually, I should probably do this story. So these are just all the conversations for this story. And I believe, I did the same thing for Red Cloud. So I said, what is the plot progression for the obstacle character through line? And then it went through, explained what he would do in order to impact or challenge Captain Boyd, which I thought was really cool. And then what I did is I did a bunch of tests. There was one conversation. So we were developing, I was just talking with Muse, and I was trying to get it to remember a different conversation. So this is just me testing it out. Talking about Captain Boyd, and there was one where it was talking about Wes. I don't know if it showed up here. Oh, I said, okay, this is what I did because I couldn't find it. I know why, because it wasn't part of the testing. I just copy and pasted it in here. I said, you had this super cool idea, you don't remember it. And then I just pasted in Muse's original idea. It says, thank you for jogging my memory. So then I said, let's make the trusted confidant the road agent that's riding with him, but I don't have a name for him yet. And then Muse suggested a whole bunch of different character names, which could or could not fit into the story. And I liked Wes, right? And just remember Silas Sai here, right? So I said, I really like Wes. Let's weave him into the beginning of this. And then it wrote the whole scene with Wes and just put him into the scene that was based on the narrative structures. It's not this thing that's completely made up. It's a scene that has a thematic significance to the entire story, which relates back to the story of No Sudden Move, same argument that's going on in that narrative. And then you'll see I did a whole bunch of tests where they didn't quite work. Do you remember that scene we were working on with Wes and Boyd? And it says, I don't remember. And you'll see it's hard to see. That's because I have this new feature, which is you can now mute responses to not be included later in the conversations. In other words, if I unmute this, now this will be a part of it. So it will remember that it doesn't have any previous conversations about Wes or Boyd. And that's not necessarily something that you would want. And I didn't just put this feature because of the testing, although it's a great example, but it's more so there'll be times when you develop and you're brainstorming and then you decide, I don't want any part of this, but you like other parts of the thread, other parts of the conversation that you would like to keep. So all you do is just go in and blank out the ones that you don't want, and it won't think of that when you ask later. So eventually I got to a place where it did do the right ones here, Redemption in the West. So check this out. This is a different conversation, and this is actually like an hour or two past what I was working on before. And I just opened up Muse and I said, I want to go back to working on that scene with Wes and Captain Boyd. And Muse said, absolutely, let's dive back into that scene, given the rich background we've established, focus on a specific moment. So it's like going back in time to when we had talked about it before, and then adding in anything we've talked about since then, and going back, setting the scene, opening, and bringing everything back. I can use that for further conversations. So this I'm really excited about, and you can always mute different parts of a conversation and unmute them and bring them back into the fold, get them all linked together into this great, crazy story mine that you're creating here. And then that should make it really easy for you to just continually build your story and just have this open. Even while you're writing, you can always come back in and either drop in some text that you just wrote or ask it, oh, I was thinking about this for the end of the second act. How would that fit in with the theme that we've already got going on? Remember when we talked about this other person? Oh, that was another one that came up. Let's see. I wanted to show you this too. Okay. So then I'd asked it, what was the thing that you were telling me about the main character transit 2 for Captain Boyd? And it went a little far. It actually broke down the entire act. So it'll tell you bit by bit thematically what's supposed to happen in each act, which is fine. But it gave me an idea because between 2 and 3, 2, he gets suspicious, and in 3, there's some falsehood thematically. So it's almost like growing suspicious of what's going on. So then you're going to lie, right? So I just put that in there. I want number 2 to be that he gets totally suspicious of who he's writing with and ends up in number 3 lying to them, a lie that ends up getting one of his friends killed. So brainstorming ideas off of that. And then Muse went ahead and wrote those 2 big chunks. And it had suggested just a random person. So I said, let's make the friend, you gave me a name before, Silas. You remember that, right? Way back when I was telling you all those different names. And it says, yes, James, I remember suggesting the name Silas Redwater for the trusted confidant character, making Silas the friend who is tragically affected by Captain Boyd's actions as a significant layer. So it went back and remembered just by the name and got the description of Silas and then put him into this really deeply thematically meaningful moment where Boyd is going to lie to him because he's suspicious, which is a problem because he's getting this growing suspicion of things to the point where that lie gets his friend killed. And then later on, towards the end of the second act, the third transit, he'll have to come to terms with that before he finally grows into the final act. That's infinite memory, and then infinite memory within a story. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.